All right, guys. So for today's video, what I wanted to do for you guys was talk a little bit about our next steps with our characters. So many of you probably have a question as to, what do we do once we have our sculpt in a good place from ZBrush? And well, the answer there is that I'm trying to be as consistent with my workflow and showing that to you guys as I can without meandering too much into something that I don't actually do. So the idea here is, of course, we want to basically sculpt out our character, at least the majority of it, the bare necessities, which in this case are the skin. And beyond that, we want to also introduce anything else for context. Now, some of these things, as we're kind of working with this stuff, we may decide to actually take into Maya and work in Maya. And I do intend on spending quite a bit of time in Maya with you guys. But for the time being, since we've already invested so much time in ZBrush, I want to make sure that you guys get your sculpts at least into a place that you're comfortable with where it is visually for the main portion of the body. So those of you who have a full body, make sure that your skin is fully resolved. That means your feet and fingers, and we talked a little bit about how to approach your feet and your hands. Also, stuff like hair. You'll notice here, like this is by no means finished hair. I was using this for context as I was sculpting her, just to kind of help me get a certain kind of likeness that I was aiming to achieve. So now we go into the next facet of our workflow here. So assuming all of you are in a good place and ready to do so, we're going to basically start jumping back and forth between ZBrush and Maya. The first step of this process is to take what we have here, simply export it, and we're going to bring it into Maya. And the first thing you're going to notice when you do so is that the actual model itself is going to be oriented very funny in Maya. It's probably going to be shoved below the grid. And, we'll talk a little bit about when we have to worry about that and all that good stuff. So let's kind of go ahead and get going. I'm going to go into my subtool palette here. And let's just real quick turn off our artwork. We don't need that right now. And the first thing I'm going to do is just with everything that's visible, I definitely want to go ahead and take all this stuff back into Maya, but let me just do a couple checks. Yeah, I want to make sure that my poly groups on everything makes sense. So I'm going to select this hair here and turn that off actually. I'm just going to turn on only what I need for the time being. So let's grab the eyes. And I'm just going to go through this process of just quickly finding everything that I need here. I think I have some lashes in here too. It should be right here. Okay. Let me select this. And what I'm basically checking for is that all my shapes here have basically one poly group assigned. And this is not a big deal, but you see right here as I'm in wireframe mode, you'll notice that there's different colors that are assigned to this. These are basically what we call polygroups in ZBrush, or in Maya, they would be called face sets. What I'm going to do here is actually mask all of this for this subgroup. And I'm simply going to go down to polygroups, and I'm going to say group mask. And you'll notice that now it gives it all one color. So what I want to do is basically do that to every subgroup that I have. I want to make sure that it has one color assigned to it. So this one right here looks like it has one. This one has one. And this is just simply to minimize the amount of pieces that Maya will recognize in the outliner once I bring it into Maya. And this is probably the most important one here. So I think we're in business. So let's go ahead and now do the next step. Now that we check for our polygroups, I'm going to basically go down here to merge in our subtool palette. I'm going to expand that. And you guys have already been used to merging down and doing stuff like that. What we're going to do here is actually merge visible. And what that's going to do is create a new subtool in our tools palette right up here. A new tool, basically, Z tool. If I select that, you'll notice that everything within my subtool palette has basically been merged into one. That doesn't mean I lost that stuff. It just means I need to select that tool, and then that stuff will come back. So I'm just kind of toggling between these. So effectively, when I go to merge and say merge visible, it just creates a new subtool with all those subtools combined, okay? All right, so now I have this, and that's great. And what I want to do at this point is go ahead and export all this geometry and bring it into Maya. So over here where you see export at the top, I'm going to hit export, and we'll go ahead and just place this wherever your working project is. I'm just going to call this skin export or whatever you want to call it. Say okay. It's going to export it as an OBJ. And now let's jump into Maya. So to this point, I know you guys have had some experience in Maya, and we will talk about a lot of the different tools that we'll be utilizing. But I'm not going to get too specific on tools right now. I will introduce some obvious ones that I'm going to be using for the time being, but let me go ahead and import that OBJ. So I'm just going to navigate to where that is. And well, it'd be helpful if I remembered where this stuff is. Where am I going here? Projects. Right here. There we go. Skin export. And it may take a second to load. Now, the reason for that, and this is the reason I'm showing you this, is to purposely kind of hit on one potential problem that you might run into. So notice that it took quite a bit to load in. Not too bad, but still fairly problematic, you know, because that just basically is a sign that this is very heavy. So here's my sculpt from ZBrush. If I select this right now, got a pretty dense mesh. If your mesh is in like around 1 million polygons in ZBrush, I would recommend probably doing some kind of reduction, and I'll speak to that a little bit later on. But essentially, this is pretty reasonable for Maya to handle, with exception of what's happening up here. So you see all these little parts that I'm selecting here. So I'm just trying to select the hair, and you'll notice all this, it's almost like it's been segmented completely. I'm going to open up my outliner, and this is what we get. So that's not cool. So we don't want all of those different meshes. So the way to fix that, again, if I jump back into ZBrush, is to do the whole polygrouping method. So that piece was basically this one right here. So what I'm going to do is isolate this. I'm going to basically grab a mask on that. Make sure you select the entire thing. I'm going to say group mask. And now this should effectively be one cohesive group, one poly group. And now the other thing I want to do is basically troubleshoot the amount of resolution I'm bringing into Maya. So I'm going to introduce you guys to a tool here in ZBrush that allows you to do this. I'm going to select our main skin, and I'm going to duplicate it. And let's go ahead and hide the original. And now with this duplicate selected, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to a menu right up here that is called, let me actually try to move this stuff around here. Okay, there we go. Right at the top where you see Z plugin, but if you go into that menu, you're going to see something called Decimation Master. Okay, expand that menu, and you should see all this really, you know, crazy amount of buttons and sliders. Don't worry yourself too much with this stuff. This is the main thing you want to do. With the subtool selected that you want to effectively reduce, we're going to go to this Decimation Master menu. And the first thing we're going to do is hit Pre-Process Current. Make sure you hit Current and not All, okay? So I'm going to say Pre-Process Current. ZBrush is going to go ahead and do this processing thing, which it just finished. And now going back to that menu, what I effectively want to do is designate some kind of amount of polygons that we want this thing to have a threshold for. So what I may say here is, oops, let me get back to it. What I may say here is something like maybe 100,000 might be enough. So I'll go ahead and say 100. And that's roughly a reduction all the way down to about 25%. That's pretty good. So now once we dial in that number, you know, and this is much lower than the actual amount of active points, which I believe in this case is over 200,000. So I'm cutting it down quite a bit. So I'm going to go back over here. Once I establish that, I'm going to say decimate current. And there you go. So what you have is a triangulated mesh. But if I show the actual form, it's pretty true to what I actually have in the high-res sculpt. So I'm just going to kind of toggle between these for a second so you can see. This is the decimated one. This is our original. You can see it's pretty darn consistent. Now, of course, this mesh here is only used for one thing. It's used so that we can export it and bring it into Maya and do a pretty good topology pass, okay? So now, in the same way we did before, I'm going to go ahead and say merge visible. Only have visible what you need, and that will basically create a new one, which is this right here. If I turn on all the polygroups, you'll see that this is nice and decimated. It's much more manageable to export this now. And just so you know, you can do this decimation to any one of your meshes if you want to lighten it up. And I could have went even lighter with this if I wanted to. Okay, so now that I have that, let's export it one more time. We'll just write over that original skin export. Say yes. I'm going to jump back into Maya and let's just start a fresh scene. All right, let's go ahead and import. Bring that skin import in. That was much quicker when it loaded just now. Now let's check our outliner and see if we cleaned up the groups. Much, much better. So you'll see this is definitely more manageable and more representative of the amount of shapes that we actually have. I'm going to go ahead and group this just to keep everything clean. And of course, the first thing you notice is that everything is under the ground and all that good stuff. So this is going to happen with all of your models. Okay, each and every one of you is going to be faced with this problem that when you first export it from ZBrush, bring it into Maya, you're going to run into this caveat. So what you want to do is you can either A, choose to just ignore this for right now and continue working at this exact position, so that way when you bring things back into ZBrush, everything's in sync, or you basically have to commit to going ahead and aligning this in the way that you want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just commit to changing this orientation. I'm going to basically move it so that it's set properly on that origin in Maya. And once I go ahead and do so, I'm going to go ahead and freeze these transformations. And let's go ahead and reset them as well. Once everything resets, let's give it a second. Looks like it's thinking for some reason. Oh, there we go. Maybe I didn't hit the button. There we go, we reset it. Okay, so it wasn't thinking, I just didn't hit the button. Okay, so now all these are effectively zeroed out. If I open up our channel box, which is, where is it? Here we go, right here. Let me close these. You'll see that everything is zeroed out for this piece of geometry, which is good. So now we're going to do this process of introducing you into how to effectively retopologize your model. Now, retopologizing your model is really a process of each individual piece one at a time, okay? And this is only stuff that you're gonna basically have sculpted in ZBrush, bring it into to Maya and work with. Other things in your designs you may actually choose to do within Maya from scratch. And you know, we'll talk about just working in that way as well. But for the time being, let's stay focused on this task. So I'm gonna basically go and select the main skin, which is what I wanna actually retopologize. And what I'm gonna do is, once it's selected, right up here at the top, where you see this magnet icon, I'm gonna select that. And what that does is it makes this a live, what's called a live mesh. If I go into wireframe mode, you'll see that the mesh is highlighted with this kind of slightly muted green, and that's an indication that this is a live mesh. Okay. I'll explain it a little more clearly what exactly that does. When it's a live mesh, you can't select it. So I am going to select everything else and just hide it for right now. Okay, so once we have our mesh live, all good to go. The next thing I'm going to do is right up here in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to select this far left icon. That's basically to open up our modeling toolkit. If I click on that button, we're going to get this right here. This modeling toolkit is really fantastic, but more importantly, it's fantastic for a couple tools that I use very exclusively. One being Multicut, the other being QuadDraw. So QuadDraw is something that we're going to use right now. So if I go ahead and hit QuadDraw, just to demonstrate real quick what it does, I'm going to basically start clicking away on this model. So let's line up a point right here, right here, right here, and I'm just going to start kind of clicking away on this model. What's happening here is I'm effectively dropping what's essentially points, like vertices, on this model. They don't have polygons created yet, but they will be. And so what I want to do is kind of plot out a pass of just visualizing what my polygon edge flow might look like. Now, many of you probably don't even know where to begin with this. I'm going to also include for you guys kind of my guiding principles for establishing good edge flow on faces, regardless if it's a humanoid character or creature or whatnot. The main thing that I try to establish here is I basically try to analyze the form, and I want to create edge loops that truly support the form. So the shape of your model is the first indicator of how you should approach it. And then the next indicator is just thinking about deformation. So as I work a few passes here, I'll just talk out loud about what I'm doing. So once I designate these points, and I'm just clicking with my left mouse button to assign these points onto the surface. Still in QuadDraw, if I hold down Shift, what basically happens is the cursor will highlight what kind of polygon I can create as I hover over these points. So in this case right here, you can see I get this green polygon highlighted. If I just click down, that polygon is now created. And another thing worth noting, you notice that as I put that polygon in place, it's kind of getting shoved in the surface. It becomes hard to see. So what you may want to do is up here in your renderer menu, switch it down to legacy, and you won't have that problem. It'll just show through as if it's bleeding through. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm just holding down Shift, and I'm just creating polygons. Guys, I hope this is blowing your mind, because honestly, this is really, since the inception of this process, it has really been a game changer for modelers and digital sculptors. This is just an amazing way to work. So, so now you can kind of start to understand that the benefit of this is really simple. It allows us to flush out design and shape in something like ZBrush, where I can freely sculpt there and really make things, just worry about the artistic. And then over here, this forces me to think about the technical. And that's something I preach to you guys at the beginning of class, is that we're going to separate the artistic from the technical. This is a very, very important thing to grasp. Now, one thing that you're probably saying is, what am I thinking about right now as I'm creating this topology? Well, to be quite honest, a lot of it is, I've done it so many times now that I kind of innately already know what to look for. But the truth of it is, I typically just start. And as long as I'm treating things as these broad patches, things will work and things won't work, and I just modify as I go. So here I'm just gonna, slowly I worked out from the eye. I'm gonna come over here to the mouth now, and I'm just gonna draw these really big polygons here. So literally some big ones like this. Let's work our way over in this area, and you'll notice a few decisions that I'm going to make here in just a second. And all I'm trying to seize control of here in the mouth is just a nice radial flow. So in the same way I made this kind of a circular flow for the eye socket, I'm doing the same thing here for the mouth. I'm going to provide a good draw over for you guys on just a general guideline. The problem with guidelines is I find that anytime I give students a guideline to, hey, this is the kind of topology flow that you should be doing, to me it's not really, it's like giving you the fish but not really teaching you how to fish, if that makes any sense. And I don't want to do that. I want you guys to understand what to actually look for when you're creating this stuff. So here I'm simply just expanding upon this initial loop or strip that I created here. And I'm starting to make some general assumptions for how this edge flow should be. One thing I want to account for, since this is going to be a character that's going to be rigged and animated and needs to articulate a certain way, I definitely want to make sure that I am considering all of those performance aspects and really trying to prime this to work in that way. So I'm going to move some stuff around. Here's our NLF, or what would be our NLF. I think what I need to do is probably compress this stuff a little bit here. So that way I can work in a little star junction right over here. So I'm going to do something to this effect. Now, there's so many ways to create good topology for your face. There's not one right way to do it. There's just many right ways. There are wrong ways to do it for sure, but many, many right ways. So it's as long as we're in the realm of one of those right ways, we'll be all good. So I'm going to continue forth here. So effectively, all I'm doing right now is just creating polygons, and slowly but surely we'll get this to where I have one cohesive mesh. So I'm going to try to get as far as I can in this recording without boring you guys too much, but it is worth it for you guys to kind of see me working with this. And as you're creating this mesh, one thing you should do from time to time, if I hit W on my keyboard just to kind of enter my move tool, and make sure you're in object mode as well. So I'll make sure to kind of go and remove history as much as I can. Where's my channel box? Here we go. So all this history that's getting appended, I definitely don't want to maintain all that stuff as I'm working. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. In this case, I have it set to a marking menu, which I'm accustomed to using. So I'll just remove history. All that stuff goes away. And then once it goes away, as long as my same mesh is still live, if I select this mesh that we just created and go back to my modeling toolkit and hit quad draw once more, it just becomes active again. Okay. Now, let's say I make this mesh active again and I'm working with it. What if there's an area I want to remove? So we talked about holding down Shift allows me to see visible polygons I can create. But what if I want to move something? I can basically hold down Control and Shift, and when something is highlighted yellow within Quad Draw, I can remove that component. So in this case, I'm going to take this out right here. And let's say I just want to move this one over a little bit. It's as simple as middle mouse dragging either the point, the edge, or the entire face, okay? Strictly up to you how you want to approach that. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift, create these new polygons right here. Very good. Let's move this way. We'll make that connection there. And again, so here's what's interesting. Like I said, as I'm kind of working at this little by little, I will start to identify things that aren't quite working for me. But nonetheless, I'll continue with whatever pass I'm doing, just so I can kind of get something relatively good in place. I'm going to go ahead and remove this because I want to do something a little more radial here. So I think what I'm going to do is remove this and this. I'm going to just snap this up there. So what I just did right there, if you take a point and just middle mouse drag it to another point, it'll actually auto weld it together, which is quite nice. So I'm kind of purposely making this a much broader patch right here. We'll talk about patches and all that stuff as well. Let's go out this way. So now I can start to see areas that I really want to start kind of connecting some dots here. So let's bring some of these in. One thing I do look for when I'm doing this kind of thing is I basically look to kind of encompass certain areas with an edge loop. So for example, if you notice, this edge loop right here is perfectly encompassing the eye. This edge loop right here is perfectly encompassing the main portion of the mouth. But then if I go a little bit further out, this is perfectly encompassing the nose and the mouth, and so forth. This will basically be like a broader patch. And then what I end up trying to shoot for on the face is a hairline edge loop that just basically frames the entire face as well as I can get it, at least. So right now, I'm mostly managing everything very manually, just kind of moving things around. Once I get a little bit more information in here, you'll see how I basically go about utilizing the tool's strengths to make things much neater in how they're being placed. I'm going to slide this stuff in. Let's get rid of this one right here. So this is starting to stretch a little much. So I'm going to get rid of that. Move this down. So what I might want to do there is something to this effect. So just always looking for ways to kind of keep things spread out in a relatively nice way. Let's move this up right here. So here's an area that I want to make sure an edge loop is being preserved. Right where that brow ridge is basically most prominent, I definitely want to make sure I have an edge right along that edge. So I'm going to do that real quick. Let's work our way up in this direction. So let's say I want to quickly add an edge in here. All you have to do is hold down Control, and you're going to see a highlighted green edge loop that basically is showing me where I can insert one. So let's say like right here, for example, if I go ahead and click down, it's going to insert that edge. And everything just respects the shape of your sculpt, which is fantastic. So I'm going to do one more right here. Now make sure as you're dropping any extra resolution that things are remaining snapped where they need to be. these first passes usually, I find a lot of things that, you know, I can improve once I look at things with fresh eyes as far as topology. You know, the great thing is right now I don't have to worry about shape. Like, this is really just an exercise of getting exactly the kind of edge loops that I want. So one thing I'm probably going to do right here is let's say I wanted to introduce one more edge right here. That's great, but it's going to run right into the corner of my mouth, and I don't know that I want that to be the case. I think I feel a little more comfortable if these were running toward the edge of the mouth, so I might actually modify that real quick. So let's see how we can do that. I'm going to go ahead and remove some of these faces we created. And this is just to also demonstrate how we can modify things quite quickly. Let me undo that real quick. I'm going to bring this one, connect it right over here. Let's shoot for that. So let's remove this, 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 this. I'm going to slide this up. Move that. Okay. So effectively what I want is this to come down. So let's make a little space here. Usually making these kinds of adjustments help quite a bit. Let's bring that right there. We're going to snap those together. So now what I'm going to do is just draw out a couple points here. I know this looks crazy and it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and it really is, but you really will start to get the hang of it once you dive in and start working with it a little bit. The other thing I'm trying to be mindful of here is that this this expression on my character is not neutral. There is a slight expression there, right? So that is something I would want to anticipate, you know, having to kind of reduce a little bit. So very broad cheeks right here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce a little more res. Now, right now, what I'm doing is I'm purposely dropping in more resolution because I want to show you guys something. And it's that, you know, you're easily looking at this probably saying, well, this is cool, but it's starting to get a little bit messy. How do we control that without having to manually go in and make all these changes? So what I basically would do here, I notice I'm going in and I'm just dropping quite a bit of resolution. Here's what's awesome. If I go ahead and hold down Shift, I can effectively relax all these points. And I'm using my stylus on a tablet right now, so this gives it pressure sensitivity for me, which is great. But this allows me to go in and really do like a nice delicate treatment on redistributed that resolution. Now I usually reserve this for when things are further developed, meaning when I have a little more information in here. This is usually when I'll start this process, but just to kind of speed things up here and show you guys, this is what you'll really benefit from. So you'll see that for the moment, I'm starting to get a pretty interesting, you know, edge flow happening here. There's a few things I really like, some stuff that maybe I'll consider doing a little bit different. But I'm going to continue with my pass here and try to have something that is pretty fleshed out by Tuesday's class. And I'll show you guys a little bit further demonstration during class, okay? In the meantime, those of you who are interested in doing the process of exporting your model and bringing it into Maya for the purpose of taking a stab at retopologizing, go ahead and do so, okay? Just remember, it's pretty straightforward. Follow the steps in this video, and you'll be up and running doing this fairly quickly, okay? And just one thing to just quickly demonstrate, if I go ahead and hit my move tool once more, I'm gonna select this mesh. Let me just duplicate it, move it over. I just wanna show you guys what's really cool about this. And if I just smooth that, you know, here we have something that's just the beginnings of replicating my model, but with a much better mesh. Something that really has optimized topology, is going to be really good for deformation, and very friendly for sculpting for further needs. Okay. All right, guys. So that's an introduction into the quad draw process of taking in your sculpt from ZBrush and starting to retopologize. I'm telling you, once you guys get your sculpts really refined in ZBrush, and then we get it to a place where we're starting to define final topology in Maya, you're going to really see your models turn a corner, and you're going to be pretty proud of the work, okay? So let's keep on going. See you guys Tuesday. Bye.